Hokum, directed by Damian McCarthy, feels like a 2-for-1 horror experience where, in one approach, we get a paranormal murder mystery, while the other approach explores a more psychological path, exploring past traumas in our main character. And despite the fact that the psychological element of the film has very little to do with the actual murder mystery, it still manages to establish and bridge conceptual, thematic, and symbolic connections between the two. And I think this absolutely bone-chilling scene that introduces this bug-eyed maniac named Jack the Jackass serves as an excellent center point that explains not only his relevance to the narrative and what it means to the main character, but also its symbolic relationship to the murder mystery. Now, before I move on, I have to make the obligatory liability PSA of letting everybody know that this analysis will contain major spoilers about the film. So if you'd like to hear non-spoiler thoughts about it, check out the review I dropped a few weeks ago. Now moving on to the scene itself. So, before we get to this, let's start where the scene actually begins. We see Ohm wandering around the honeymoon suite as he investigates the missing bartender. After not finding anything readily apparent, he sits on the bed, leans into drinking whiskey, which has become his coping mechanism throughout the film, and proceeds to pass the fuck out. What we get next is his actual nightmare, which is a darkly surreal depiction of Ohm's life-changing and traumatizing childhood event. Through an all-black backdrop, we see Ohm as a child playing with a gun while watching an ominous kids TV show hosted by a fictional character called Jack the Jackass. He stares straight down the barrel of the gun right before tilting it and accidentally shooting his mother in the face in the distance. We see his mother slowly walking behind him and eventually kneeling down to caress him. All while, as Jack the Jackass kids show continues to play in the background. Suddenly the TV shuts off and then this happens. We get this powerful and shocking image of Jack towering over him as he sleeps. And look, I'm no newbie when it comes to traumatizing cinema. I've seen more than most people really should, but this moment and this image is peak creepypasta-esque nightmare fuel. The creative decision to have Ohm laying down unconscious with Jack towering over him is to express this idea that Jack is an entity that holds power and influence over Ohm's life, Ohm's personality, his behavior, his worldview, and really just his overall mental state is being held hostage by this creature from hell. But what the hell is he, and why is Ohm being terrorized by this freaky asshole? As much as I know most people would want to hear that Jack is genuinely a supernatural demon that is influencing horrifying and awful things to happen in Ohm's life, I feel like the real answer here is more in the psychological realm. Sure, Jack the Jackass is incredibly terrifying and was present during Ohm's horrifying memory, but he's not really a paranormal entity that influenced this tragic event. On the contrary, it's the horrifying event of Ohm accidentally shooting his mother in the face that created this monstrous image of Jack. What we witness in the film as Jack is through Ohm's psychological lens. It's an example of trauma by association. In reality and outside of Ohm's mind, the fictional character of Jack the Jackass does not actually look this terrifying and unsettling. This is proven at the very beginning of the film when we see Ohm looking through a box of old mementos, and we see the cover of this TV magazine of Jack the Jackass. You can clearly see that Jack has much more of an innocent and silly look in comparison to this abomination. So what's really going on here is that Ohm's traumatizing childhood experience has psychologically distorted his image of Jack. Ohm's entire perception of something that was once sacred is now directly associated with the worst thing that has ever happened to him. It's similar to how one can never listen to a certain song the same way ever again, when it's been tainted by something deeply traumatic. Not only did Ohm witness the death of his mother before his very eyes, but his own hands pulled the trigger, creating a monstrous combination of guilt and trauma that would psychologically haunt him for the rest of his life. It explains his excessive drinking and his combative douchebag type behavior. His drinking habits were formed as a coping mechanism to numb and suppress his dark past, and his behavior and personality presents himself as someone who hates people and hates the world with a sense of superiority. But in reality, this is all just a projection of how he feels about himself. He has an overwhelming lack of self-worth due to the blame that he puts on himself for his mother's death, and he treats others the way that he himself feels he deserves to be treated. And all of that self-hatred, guilt, and trauma has both symbolically and psychologically manifested itself into this demonic form of the once childlike and innocent TV show host, Jack the Jackass. But one last thing I wanted to touch on before wrapping this all up is the symbolic connection between Jack and the bunny-eared Halloween costume worn by the murder victim, Fiona. I think it's highly unlikely that it's just a coincidence that there are two different horrifying pieces of imagery in Hokum in the form of a donkey and or bunny. So what's the significance here? It's incredibly common in literary works to use donkeys and bunnies as symbols for innocence. So Fiona dying in her bunny costume represents a literal death of an innocent person, whereas Jack, the monstrous spawn of Satan's ass, represents the metaphorical death of Ohm's childhood innocence. But it also serves as a reflection and metamorphosis for who Ohm has become as a person. At once, he was innocent, but now has a distorted and ugly exterior that he showcases to the rest of the world. And with that, wraps up my thoughts on this terrifying scene from Hokum. Please consider supporting my channel on Patreon to gain access to my Discord server where we shoot the shit and talk film all day long. And obviously please share your own personal insight and experience with Hokum. My favorite part of making these videos is reading through everybody's relationship with the film, so please don't forget to do that. But if you really enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.